the one thing you can't control is if you look like her. And when I'd walk into a room, that would like bring them to their knees. I would say something or do something, and they'd say, "Oh my God, do that again. Say that again. When you said that, you look just like it." And I was searching maybe for people to turn their head when I walked in the room and say, "Oh my God, you look just like Kit," because I wanted that.
Hi there, grief growers, and welcome back to the show. I am so delighted to be here with you today. If you have been growing alongside me in my work for a while, welcome back. And if you are new to me and my work, hello. My name is Shelby Forsythia. I am a grief coach, two-time author, and the founder of Life After Loss Academy, which is an online program that has helped dozens of grieving people stop feeling lost, stuck, broken, and alone in the aftermath of devastating loss, and start building lives that they genuinely love from the lives that loss forced them to live. This includes not only death-related losses, but also divorce, major diagnosis, and every other loss that changes your life. Here on this show, we believe that grief is not something to get over, but something that comes along for the ride of our lives. And that is never more true than in my conversation with today's guest. On today's episode, I am speaking with Cara Belvin, who is the founder of Empower, a nonprofit that matches children who've lost a parent with adults who've experienced parent loss. It is the grief version of Big Brothers Big Sisters that is changing the way kids move through life after loss. We are getting into the blessings and the curses of looking like a loved one who died. Sometimes your grief is worn on your literal face. Why parent loss is so incredibly life-changing, especially if you experience it at a young age, and the power of mentorship and friendship to transform isolation into connection. Here's a little bit more about Cara. Cara Belvin was 9 years old when her mother, Kit, died of breast cancer. She founded Empower in 2013 around her dining room table as a grassroots movement for kids and young adults impacted by parent loss to get support for that loss from others who'd experienced the loss of a parent, and word quickly spread about her work. Thousands of inquiries came in from people who wished for an organization like Empower when they were growing up. Today, Empower is an international nonprofit with thousands of volunteers across the globe. Cara holds a BS in psychology from the University of Connecticut and an MS in psychology from Texas A&M University. Her efforts and work through Empower have been featured on CNN, The Today Show, ABC, PBS NewsHour with Judy Woodruff, and more. Cara, thank you so much for coming on the show. I am delighted to have you here to talk about a super unique grief experience, and that is looking like your person who died. I wrote an article about this probably, I'd say at least 5 or 6 years ago now, and it was called Seeing My Dead Mom in the Mirror, My Biggest Grief Trigger is My Own Face, and it went semi-viral on Medium, which is a blogging platform, and I knew when I connected with you that this is something I wanted to talk to you about. So welcome to Grief Grower, and I would love if you shared your own story of losing your mom, but then also as you're aging, looking more and more like the person you lost and how that's affected and informed your grief.
Yeah, that's such a great question. I don't think I've ever been asked this question. In this grief space, I've talked about this among, with my family and friends forever. But I so appreciate this question. And then I'll try not to cry, but everybody kind of needs a good Friday cry. So if I cry, that's all right. So, yeah, I look just like my mom. My mom's name was Kit Murphy, Kit Murphy Guzzi. And so my name is Cara Guzzi Belvin. My mom was Irish Catholic from Boston, like pretty, traditional big Irish Catholic Murphy family in Boston, like you read about. And that saved me. After my mom died of breast cancer, when I was 9 years old, I remained so close to her family, but I looked like her. And that was triggering for them. Yeah. And so I was acutely aware of that as I was growing up. And even now, I'm 48 years old, and I'm a mom to a son and a daughter. And my mom was a mom to a son and a daughter and a wonderful husband. And so not only do I look like my mother, but I've emulated a lot of my mother's personality and characteristics, and just also kind of life circumstances. She was a teacher. I became a school psychologist. And I think a lot of us girls who lose our mom young, we do that. I wear high heels because my mother always wore high heels. I wear big earrings. I love costume jewelry because she did. She was a girl's girl. She had a million girlfriends. So do I. And so there were so many ways that I was really trying. I think I was purposely trying to emulate my mother. But the one thing you can't control is if you look like her. And what was hard, I think, for my family, and I really have a lot of empathy for them, and who I'm talking about specifically is my mother's sister, her best friend, my Aunt Patty. And then it was, her brothers and their wives. It was my mother's mother, my Nana Kay. And it was her best friends. And when I'd walk into a room, that would like bring them to their knees. And that will make me cry because I felt bad about that. I felt like I was making them feel bad for many years. I would say something or do something and they'd say, "Oh my God, do that again. Say that again. When you said that, you look just like it." So I grew up for decades. I heard that and I knew that and I was proud of that. But I was a blonde. My mother was a brunette, blue eyes, thick, dark, black hair, straight. And I was a blonde with curly hair because I'm half Irish, I'm half Italian. So I look more Italian than I do Irish. So as I got older, I was trying to look more like my mother. I realized I was dyeing my hair brown. I was straightening my hair, and I was searching maybe for people to turn their head when I walked in the room and say, "Oh my God, you look just like Kit," because I wanted that. Growing up, I felt bad. I looked like her because I felt bad for my dad and my aunts and my Nana. As I got older, I really leaned into that. I think it felt like another way to honor her. So that served me well, but I understand when people say that's hard. And I think it's hard because it's hard for you or it's hard to watch other people grieve.
Yes, well, and I think you're speaking to so much of this sense of it's a blessing and a curse because it's something that we can't choose. I look like my mother as well, and we walk into a room and we remind people of who they've lost.
Yes.
And yet we are our own individual persons living our own individual lives.
Yes.
And so feeling like we can differentiate ourselves from our mothers can be tricky. But then also to look in the mirror and be like, that's the person who gave birth to me. That's the person who loves me more than anything.
Yes.
Is so comforting at times. It's comforting and terrifying.
Yes.
And I remember speaking to Hope Edelman about this on another podcast years and years ago, but it's also surreal to surpass the age that a parent was and watch yourself age in ways that they did not get to. And so to also live through that experience, I'm not there yet. My mom died at 52. I'm 32. So I've got about 20 years to go still. God willing. We know as grief professionals that aging is a gift as opposed to a curse. But kind of watching yourself go through these same milestones, I'm remembering my sister and I both look like my mother. My best friend joked, "Shelby, when your mom had children, she just hit copy paste and then just like made kids." Yeah. Your dad was not involved. But I remember my sister, both at different times in our lives, have walked into hairdressers, to your point, with a picture of our mother and said, "Make me look like this." Yeah. For me, it was a couple years ago. My sister just got bangs this summer. My mom had bangs her whole life. My sister just got bangs this summer.
Love it.
And we're like, holy crap, you look like mom. And so some of it's wonderful, some of it's horrendous. And I'm just so glad that you're speaking about this because there is this guilt or this avoidance of making the people around you feel terrible, but also remembered. And then you also feel that you were a legacy bearer in some way because you literally bear her face.
You bear her face, you bear her legacy. Those are undeniable facts. And I want to really be sensitive also to some girls who've lost their mother. Maybe if the relationship was strained, maybe there's a motivation to maybe not dress like your mom or not look like your mom. I understand all of that. I'm saying for me personally, it really served me well. It served me as a legacy bearer. I feel so grateful. I look at my mom and I think, first, I can't believe she went through what she went through. She knew she was dying. My mother was sick for 2 years. She knew she was dying. She asked all of her family and friends to help my dad raise us, and they did all that she asked and more, which is such a beautiful way of looking at life. I've surpassed my mother's age. My mother was 37 and she left behind a 9-year-old girl and a 13-year-old boy. So undeniably, and thank God for Hope Edelman. Hope Edelman was my childhood hero, my favorite. And she educated me time and time again on all of these things that I didn't know. I didn't spend my time researching and writing. I spent my time, particularly over the last 10 years as a social entrepreneur, building a nonprofit, building a mentor program for kids in grief. But Hope, thank God, she explained those things to me, and she explained them as neon ages. And what's surprising about neon ages, and I often do share this with some of my friends, maybe my age, who've lost their mom, I say, okay, careful about these neon ages. Undeniably, you may be shook to your core when you turn the age that your mother was when she died. That's undeniable. The year leading up to it, you may have some pretty high anxiety. That feels like it's coming out of nowhere, and then you realize, oh, this is why.
Yeah.
You will have, if you have children and they are the same age, undeniably age 9 or age 13 for my son and daughter should have been my neon years. But here's the thing in grief that like trips you up every time is those weren't my neon ages. When I was 35, I had a regular mammogram, as I always did, because I was screened so thoroughly. And my mammogram came back fine. The results were normal. And the oncologist told me to go home, and I lost it. And I cried. I had really like an anxiety attack in her office. And she was such a good doctor. She knew me this well. She knew my history and didn't have to bring a file out to know that. She said, Cara, that was it. Your mother was 35 when she was diagnosed with breast cancer. That was the age. She said, you thought I was going to be diagnosing you with breast cancer today. And I said, yes, I did. And I got in my car. I think I, picked up a coffee, windows down, sunroof open, like Jerry Maguire, like Tom Petty moment. I'm like singing in the car ride home thinking, oh, this was my rebirth. I didn't share my mother's fate. I'm 35. I have my son and my daughter and an amazing husband. And here I'm living. Aging is a gift. So it wasn't 37. My neon age was 35. And then growing, in the neighborhood we are in Boston, little girl next door to me turned 9 years old, and I'm very good friends with her mother. And it killed me because I thought, she is so vulnerable, this little 9-year-old girl, this beautiful little girl, sweet, wonderful family. And I love her mom. And I just kept praying nothing would happen to her mother. And my children were much younger than her at the time. So her age 9 was my neon age. And those are the things that trip you up in grief. It's like, I don't know how many books you could read or, to educate yourself and to prepare yourself for that. But that's part of what trips a lot of us up growing, grief comes in waves, or there's triggers. Thank God we're talking about that. Thank God I didn't grow up understanding what a trigger was. Thank God the younger generations, and you're part of the younger generation, you understand it, you talk about it. We didn't do that in the 80s. We didn't have safe spaces, Shelby, right? Like you just moved on. I mean, my mother died and the pictures came off the wall and we moved forward, and
Wow.
You got good grades and you were college bound and you were going to be a Division I athlete. And like there was this pressure. I say the pressure served me well because I can't begrudge my father. I love my father more than anything and for everything he did for me. But those are the kinds of things I think that trip us up, that surprise a lot of us who've lost a parent when we were children or as a young adult, or untimely, because my grief is not more shiny or more important than yours. Hard things are just hard. So I
Yes.
lost my mother when I was 9. Everyone would say, God, that must have been so hard. But it's hard for any of us, especially when you lose your mother. Your mother is everything.
Yeah. And thank you for speaking to looking like your person who died may not always be something you want. I love that you spoke to moms with, or girls with strained relationships to their mothers, but I'm also thinking of other instances where I've had clients or students in my online course say something like, I look like my biological parents who I never met, never knew, but all I knew was that I was not wanted. Or I look like the father who abused me or the grandfather who shunned me. Like I look like people I do not want to look like. And so there's this resistance to carrying their presence, their impact on your face. It is very much a physical manifestation, an
Yes.
inescapable one of grief. People talk about, the body keeps the score, or Mary Frances O'Connor's
Hmm.
like the grieving body. Your
Hmm.
body carries grief, but sometimes so does your face. Your face
Yes.
actually carries your grief. So thank you for
Yes.
speaking to
Yes.
this is not always something that feels like a blessing more often
Yes.
than a curse. And God love that doctor. That for folks who don't know the term neon years, this is something
Hmm.
from Hope Edelman's work where there's like a flashing neon number in the future that gets closer and closer as you grow closer to that age. And for some people, it's a death date. And for some
Hmm.
people, for Cara, this is what I call in Life After Loss Academy a date of knowing, which is usually a date of a diagnosis, or for instance, for other grief events, like 42 is the year we found out my dad was cheating on my mom. And so getting to
Yeah.
42 is a milestone in my marriage
Yeah.
with my
Yeah.
spouse or something like that. And so
Yes.
dates of knowing information about a grief event, not necessarily
Yes.
death dates, can also be neon numbers
Yes.
or neon ages in your life.
Yes.
I love that you brought that up.
I
I do
love
want to
that you're
pivot.
putting a name to that. I've never even heard of that. See this in our space, there's like, you can never
Mm,
have enough of this information. But now that you know that, it can, again, it may bring anxiety, but it also may bring anger and rage. I've been kind of fixated on this. We were serving girls for so long, not yet serving, we're not serving all genders who've lost a mom or dad. So I have an interesting, historical at Empower. But I always wanted to serve boys in particular who had lost a mother or father, because what I saw was, you know, men raised in a, boys don't cry world become men who
yes.
rage. And you making those distinctions, especially for men, to understand what those neon ages do. They do bring some anxiety, they do bring depression, or they do bring anger and rage. Sometimes we just don't know it. We didn't have we couldn't put our finger on it.
Yeah, absolutely. So grief gorges is a new term for you. Dates of knowing can also be grief events as opposed to just birthdays or just days. In case you need another day to keep track of.
Yes. Yes,
Sometimes dates or
exactly.
ages of knowing are things that can just serve you in terms of awareness as well. I do want to pivot to exactly where you're going, which is supporting grieving kids who've lost a parent. And this is the work that you do at Empower, which is the nonprofit that you founded. And I want to get into why exactly the loss of a parent is so life-changing. I think there's so much in our media and so much in our culture. I remember I did a podcast episode years and years ago with Jana DeCristofaro from the Dougie Center, and she's like, why is it that every Disney princess and every superhero is either an
Yes.
orphan or has lost one or more parents? And there's kind of this sense too of like, well, if it's too complicated a storyline, the movie ends up being more than an hour and a half.
Sure.
And if you have too
Yep.
many relationships to explain, sure.
Sure.
I think that's a cop
Sure.
out by Hollywood.
Exactly. Sure.
But
Whatever. That's fine.
there's this sense culturally where we tell people losing a parent is life-changing, but we don't talk about how. Like, what is the impact of losing a parent, I would say, under the age of 21, under the age of
Yeah.
18, when you are
Yeah.
still forming yourself? We're always forming ourselves into people, but especially when you are reliant on a parent for
Yes.
knowing how to be in the world. So I'd love to talk about your work with Empower. What is it? And
Oh.
then what makes the loss of a parent so
Oh my God,
devastating for
Shelby, how
kids?
long do we have? This is okay. Here's the thing. Here's the sitch in Hollywood. I'd say, Cinderella's mother on her deathbed, she said, "Have courage and be kind." So when I started this nonprofit, "Have courage and be kind" was the quote that was on everything. I was trying to make everything really colorful and bright. I didn't want it to be black and white. I wanted everything to be colorful for the children that were enrolled in our program for many reasons. My life was in black and white. I mean, that's the truth, but I still saw there was beauty in the world after my mother died. So I was blessed with, I didn't have jealousy or envy for my friends whose moms did not die, because that's very common. I don't know where it
Mhm.
was, or in my DNA, in my bones. I didn't feel envy or jealousy. I had this sixth sense that um, my loss was very unnatural. Um, but I knew that as I grew and met, and my world, got bigger, that I would meet other women who knew adversity and whose trauma or tragedy was more in sequence. Mine was so out of sequence, right? So there was just kind of an understanding. But yes, I mean, why do we love the story of Cinderella or Elphaba? I'm Elphaba. I mean, the Wicked 20th anniversary came up, and I was nominated for like the Elphaba Award. Why do we love that? Why do we want to see that, like, we're unstoppable? When the world stopped, when our parent died, and your parent is everything. Again, a strained relationship or not. I mean, I always say when I look in the mirror, on a tough day and I want to remind myself I'm strong and I can get through it, I say, straighten your crown and remember whose daughter you are. My mother was no bullshit. My mother was, she would tell you what's what. And I loved that about her. And she had an
In her high
opinion
heels, Kit Murphy.
in her high heels, and she was gorgeous and smart and funny and loving. And yeah, I want to straighten my crown and remember whose daughter I am, because my mother didn't really put up with a lot, and I love that. Um, but the loss of a parent, and the reason why I actually started a nonprofit, not that I suggest anyone go and start a nonprofit. There's plenty of really beautiful, especially, childhood bereavement organizations around the country that exist. And so, there's many to support. You can volunteer your time and donate your money and support other great orgs in this space. The reason I did this was because I looked around and recognized this one thing wasn't really being done, and that was mentorship. I would have loved, when I was younger, growing up, to have met like a 40-year-old woman who survived the loss of her mom. So growing up, I never met another girl whose mom died, which was like living on planet Mars. And I never met an adult woman who had survived it. Right. So, and I'll talk about that when we, talk more about youth mentorship for, children grieving, and why it was so unique. I didn't know no one was really doing it. I didn't know today we're still the only nonprofit that had that idea, or that's, saw that value in youth mentorship. But all the science says, you can see yourself in someone else's, in someone else, and someone who is further along on that journey is really impactful. It reminds you that you'll survive it. So, but the loss of a parent, we do know, I mean, there's a little bit of research, not enough, but the research out there does suggest that an early loss, it does, it puts you at risk. And it is a loss that comes with, higher risks of anxiety and depression, school absenteeism, behavioral problems, illicit drug use, unplanned pregnancy. We know that. But I didn't know that growing up, because it seemed, well, there's life and there's death, and, everyone's going to lose a parent. I think that what we didn't recognize was just how painful the loss of a parent is. And then how oftentimes it's compounded by a world going on around you as normal as a young person, and how you are trying to keep up with that life going on around you as normal, and how exhausting that is. So for me, I describe it as like a 1-ton brick on my chest. I thought about my mother every minute of every day, like a lightning bolt. So those around me, out of love, maybe didn't come out and try to help or support or, talk about my mother's loss out of love, because they didn't want to rock the boat or remind me of something, it looked like I was having a good day or I had good grades, so why rock the boat? But I unfortunately learned rules that said, like, you're not allowed to talk about this here. And so for 20 years, I did not talk about my mother. It was the most painful event. And I was moving through the world, and I was putting one foot in front of the other. And I still had a beautiful childhood filled with friends. And my dad was funny. I had a funny house, and lots of love, army and family and friends around me and my brother to support us. The kind of friends you read about, beautiful community in a Connecticut suburb, a beautiful future ahead. But I was in a great deal of pain.
Is that something you hear from the kids in Empower too? Is like, I just wish I knew somebody whose life
Yes.
also looked like this, because adult or
Yes.
child, it seems like that isolation or the sense of being other in a world that's moving on as
Yes.
normal seems like such a big
Yes.
deal.
Yes. Yeah. I knew I was onto something. I mean, 10 years ago, I started this, and even before it was a mentor program, it was just an event on Mother's Day. I thought I would bring teenage girls together on Mother's Day because that was such a lousy time for me growing up. And I recognized that the 2 months leading up to the day were almost worse. And so it was that anticipatory grief. It was that, like you talk about, those dates. And it was an isolating time. And I was trying to understand, especially because I started my career as a school psychologist, I tried to understand really developmentally, why is it so isolating to lose a parent? And then you really peel it back, and some children are actually embarrassed that they've lost a parent. And so then it's this snowball effect after the loss. It's the lack of, open and honest communication. It's these rules that say you're not allowed to talk about this, number one. Number two, you should be over it by now. It's been 2 years.
Yeah,
And
exactly.
those things incite rage. Because it's hard to understand, like, why would I be so rageful after my mom died of breast cancer? Like, people get sick and die after all. Like, no, I was enraged that she died. And so you kind of think about, what is it that makes it so isolating? And what is it that makes it embarrassing? Or what you have this social component that a lot of kids at Empower have, they're shaking their heads. Yes, I knew I was onto something, because every time I would speak about my experience from 30 or 40 years ago, a room full of children in this day and age were shaking their heads saying, that's me. I'm just the girl whose mom died. So socially, you do become the girl whose mom died, or the girl who's the boy whose dad died. And that is a label. It's hard to shake. And the only way you really stand tall, put your shoulders back, stand 2 feet taller, I say, after every kid leaves an event at Empower, and, every child who's matched with a mentor, I swear I see them come in with their shoulders shrugged. They are standing 2 feet taller afterwards, because they know they're not alone. And I think all anyone ever wants to know is, like, I'll survive this. I'm not the only one who's going through this. There is life after loss. I'm going to survive this, because I can look around the room and realize I'm not alone in my grief. There are other kids powering through too. They're tripping up all the time too. They're getting it wrong. No one has the right way to grieve. But to know that someone else, somewhere else in the world, is going through this, I thought was really one of the most beautiful, empathetic, supportive ways that you can help a child of an early parent loss.
Yeah, I want to really get into the mentorship aspect of Empower, because I had never heard of this until I was introduced to your organization as well. And we do something similar in my online course, Life After Loss Academy. It's for adults 18 and up, because we use swear words a lot, and
Yeah.
talk about other components of grief, like sex and coping through food and alcohol and
Yes.
relationships and all these other things. And so it's definitely adults only over in Life After Loss Academy. But there's an exercise we do when we talk about building a life that you love from the one that loss forced you to live, where I ask people to choose at least 5 grief role models. They can be celebrities, they can be fictional characters, they can be people in your lineage and your ancestry. And I really ask them to drill down into, as a person, what about how they express their grief or carry their grief in the world is
Mm-hmm.
admirable to you? And then can you embody that for yourself? One
Wow.
of my ones that I wrote about in Your Grief Your Way is Betty White, who took her love for her husband, Alan Ludden, who was a game show host who died, I think, of stomach cancer. She channeled his memory into every character she played, including in The Golden
Wow.
Girls, when she had to reenact the death of her fictional husband, Charlie. And so as an
Mm-hmm.
actress, she put her grief into her art. And I was like, I like the idea of
Wow.
putting grief into your art. And so now, as many opportunities
Wow.
as I can, whether it's music or painting or theater or dancing, I'm like, how do I put grief into my art? And so that's just like a guiding question based on a fictional mentor. I've never met Betty White. She's gone now. But this idea of having someone to look up to who
Yeah.
carries their grief with them every day is such a profound concept for a nonprofit.
Yes.
And I'd love to know,
Yes.
like, how did that come to you? And then also, kind of as we're winding down the conversation too, how do people get involved with Empower if they if they have kids in their life, they want to connect to a group, or if they want to become a mentor themselves,
Yes.
if they're an adult
Yes.
that's far out from that loss?
Yes. Well, let me start with that. Let me say, if you are 25 years old or older and you have had the experience of losing your mother or father to death at any age and to any type of loss, we would love for you to consider being a mentor. So that's simply going to our website and hitting the inquiry button.
And I'll put that
But
in the show
why?
notes for everybody listening.
Thank you. And why that's important? Why is that a hard volunteer role? I think it might be hands down the most meaningful thing I've ever done. But hands down, one of the most emotional volunteer roles I've ever had was mentoring, girls like me, who I understood where they were going. I understood, unfortunately, very painfully, I understood how hard the road ahead of them might end up being, right?
Exactly.
So that's hard to hold space for a child like that. I'll tell you the origin story. Empower is a kind of a classic founder story. I started it around my dining room table, went on to raise millions of dollars. All of our programs are free of charge. And so I was really, I was talking to anyone who would listen, and I was garnering support and mobilizing volunteers to do this one thing, to show up for kids who'd lost a parent. And it came in the form of two things. It was events. It was events on Mother's Day and Father's Day. It was events, in the summer at, a beach party. It was a cooking class, an actor's workshop. It was these events aimed at their interest. And I always say, we had a celebrity chef in Boston teaching the girls how to roll sushi. They don't even like sushi. It had nothing to do with sushi. It was Jimmy Lang, this amazing chef, donating thousands of dollars of time and food and space to bring girls together whose moms died in a room, roll sushi. But also, he was a man who had a really beautiful story. And I wanted him to tell his story of, perseverance and survival. Although he couldn't relate personally to the loss of a mom, he had adversity and he had a lesson to share. So I was always trying to teach, hey, we're all in this together. Again, your loss is really out of sequence, but you will meet other people who have had great loss and pain too, and they'll draw strength from you. Why this was important, 10 years ago, I looked around and realized this wasn't being done. And I went to Big Brothers, Big Sisters. I sort of knocked on their door, metaphorically and actually literally and figuratively, I should say. I knocked on the door of Big Brothers, Big Sisters here in Boston. And I said, why don't you make mirror matches? Why wouldn't you match a girl like me, a 9-year-old whose mom died of breast cancer, or a 17-year-old girl who lost her mother to suicide, or a sudden illness or sudden death? Why wouldn't you match her with a woman like me who could relate to the loss of a mother? And I call that mirror matching. Well, they don't do that, and they've been around for many years, and they are the guru. And so I very arrogantly said, "Well, I'm going to try that. I'm going to
Make it
build that.
myself.
I'm
Yeah.
going to do it myself." And so, you look around the room, and I always wondered why somebody didn't do it, and then I realized I was somebody. It's like this cheesy Pinterest quote I still have up on my board, and I
Yep.
did, and I put a lot of blood,
Sometimes
sweat,
the
and tears
cheese
into it.
works, though.
Oh my God, it always does. I mean, every cheesy cliche, it's always right. My kids are 17 and 14, and I'm like, all right, here's a cheesy cliche, but I promise you it's true. It's right. Um, so what I did was I in 2017 now, I built the program. I built, 75-page policy and procedural model. It's very safe and responsible, and it emulates all the Big Brothers, Big Sisters has been doing so beautifully for youth all over America for close to 100 years. And the idea was to first recruit mentors, which is not easy, right? How can you recruit a woman like you and I to really hold space for a child? And the reason why I knew it was hard was because the very first babysitter I had when I moved to Boston, we moved in from downtown Chicago, and she was a young girl whose mother had just died suddenly of a heart condition, unknown heart condition, a healthy woman. And I watched as a lot of people in town didn't really come around out of love. And I realized, oh my God, not much has changed. It's, my mother died 30 years ago. That's how it was back then. Come on now. I thought we were so much further ahead. And then I realized I could befriend her. I could take her out for ice cream after a bad day. I was taking her back to school shopping, and I loved it. And when I was out and about doing that, other women were coming up to me because they knew who she was, because it is the
Mm.
truth. Unfortunately, everyone does know that the girl or the boy or the non-binary youth who just lost his mother, just lost their father. You do know, especially in a small community, and it rocks you to your core. And so they were kind of building a program for me. They were saying, well, tell dad I'll do that. Give him my cell phone number. I'd love to take her, prom dress shopping. And now, especially the women who had a personal lived experience, they were saying, my mother died when I was in high school, or my mother died when I was in elementary school, or my mother died my freshman year of college. I know what she's going through. And that really became the impetus, for building this mentor program. And again, I think, we are really quick to recommend therapeutic services, and I hope every child finds their way to therapy, individual or group. I'm a huge proponent.
Hmm.
I hope that they find their way to peer support through events like Empowers around Mother's Day and Father's Day in our events. There are bereavement camps in the summertime that kids can access for free. There are center-based support groups. My idea was the opposite. It was community-based. It was non-therapeutic, and I wanted to take everyday women, like you and I, and have them build support for the child, not a clinician. Because unfortunately for me growing up, what I realized was the only one who did talk to me about my mother who died was the school psychologist.
Hmm.
And quite honestly, it was a hit and miss. We didn't connect. So I didn't really have any resources growing up, and I don't begrudge anybody for that. I'm just saying it just was what it was. And I think a lot of other lay people around me that could have been supporting me, especially women in town who also had lost their mom. I would have loved if they were, came to my rescue or took me back to school shopping, because they would have been outside my family nucleus, where in the dressing room, my aunts are grieving my mother, and I'm coming out of the dressing room in my new first day of school outfit, and they're brought to their knees because I look just like my mother. And they're a prom dress, a wedding dress. I look just like my mother on my wedding day. And so that was hard. I wanted a mentor outside my family nucleus who wasn't there, who wasn't grieving my mother, that I didn't have to protect. And I didn't have to, be heartbroken watching grieve. I wanted that woman to be my mentor. And I wanted her to say, I remember what it was like when I hit those milestones, like graduating high school. This is one of the most common, conversations we have at Empower. We have hundreds and hundreds of children enrolled each year, but we have thousands and thousands of volunteers. So the girls and, girls, boys, non-binary youth of any parent loss, my intent is that they're really just meeting adults who can relate. And the number one thing we say is, as a kid, you're really scared to reach those milestones: high school graduation, college graduation, marriage, children, and a lot of us want to avoid those things, and we don't find joy in those things because we've been so terrified to go through them without our parent. Mm-hmm. And so I'm the best one to relate to. These girls were asking me those questions, when I was first starting this program. They couldn't get close enough to me. They were touching my hair, and I was like an alien from their planet, that I existed. And they had a million questions for me. How did it feel when I graduated high school without my mother? How did it feel when I got married? What was it like when I had a baby and I didn't have my mother to come and do my laundry and feed the baby and let me sleep? Mm-hmm. Look, I survived it. I survived it, and I still feel like my mother is standing right here. I feel like my mother didn't miss anything. That's how I believed, how I kept her memory alive and her spirit alive. But were those hard? Yes. And did I regrieve? Yes. Mm-hmm. And so to lose a parent is, I'd say, arguably, the most painful experience for a young person, and often snowballs into a lot of anger or confusion or great sadness, great anxiety. And I just don't think that there's quite enough understanding around us. Like I said, I think out of love, people want us to just move on. They don't want to watch. It's so painful to watch a child grieve.
Or they don't know what to do, and so they do nothing. And what Empower offers is just one way of saying, here's something to do.
Yes.
If you want
it's okay to talk about loss, as we say.
Yes.
It's okay to talk about my loss. Yes.
Yes, it reminds me very much of, I wish I remembered this person's YouTube handle, but I think there's a man on YouTube who, I think the username is everybody's dad, or your friendly dad, or something like that. But kids 20, 30 somethings will submit questions to him of how do I fix a toilet lid that's wobbly? How do I stop my sink from dripping? And so he's a handyman, but he teaches you how to take care of your home if your dad died, or your dad was never around, or your dad just wasn't a handy dad. And so kind of playing that role of what can I do?
I love it.
It's you take your small talents, you take your small gifts to contribute to somebody who is walking a similar road, because he lost it. Yes. I believe the story is he lost his dad. And so he's nobody taught me these things, so I learned them myself, or I had great men to learn them from, and so now I teach them to you. The last question I have for you is, something I love about Empower and I'm excited about is, as a queer person, I am so thrilled and honored that you have opened up Empower to more than just young girls. I know it used to be Empower Her, and now it's broadly Empower, and now serves young boys and young non-binary kids as well. And as a queer person who's married to a queer person, it's really lovely to see more people like me included in what you offer. My mom, I was 21 when my mom died, but I had just come out of the closet to her, and our relationship did not end well on a good note. And so we were fighting when she died. And having somebody, meeting older grievers who have similar or same stories to me, has absolutely changed my life. Yeah. And I'm looking forward to knowing that your organization is connecting people to the same. But the last thing I want to ask of you is, as you've shifted or opened into this
Hmm.
more expansive type of grief care, grief
Hmm.
village building,
Hmm.
where do you see the biggest gaps? Like, we are
Hmm.
missing mentors for suicide loss. We are missing mentors who are non binary or queer. We're missing mentors, or we
Yes.
need more mentors who have insert trait here, so we can put the call out over the podcast waves to, if you have the time, space, willingness to fill in a gap, I would love to make that happen for you.
Okay, I've got like 3 points I got to get in here. Okay.
Okay.
So we need mentors of, we need all kinds of mentors, even big brothers, big sisters. They do sometimes struggle to find male mentors, let's say. We all know that
Yes.
male mentors, unfortunately, are harder to find than female mentors, right? For several different reasons. There's that. There's also, here's the thing in grief, Shelby, that I love that you're bringing up and that I love. Look, I had a chip on my shoulder for the first couple of years I started Empower Her. I only started it for girls of mother loss because it was my story. I knew it well, and I knew what I wanted to give the girl what I so desperately wished I had. So I simply built it around Mother's Day retreats and beach parties and a cooking class and the mentor program naturally. And the word on the street was kind of, especially here in Boston, I started this around my dining room table in Boston and it grew to become an international nonprofit. And I'm forever grateful for that. But here are some of the things, the myths I like to dispel about grief. A lot of women would say, oh my God, I can't wait to, become a mentor because I'd love to take her prom dress shopping. I have 2 boys. I'm like, it's not about prom dress shopping. I appreciate that you acknowledge the milestone. Prom dress shopping is hard and might make a child regrieve because they are acutely aware their peers are prom dress shopping with their mother. And that's where part of the isolation is. I spoke at the teachers union last week in New York City to school psychologists, and I said, why is it isolating? Why, part of this, we have a loneliness problem across America. Maybe it's social media, but let me just tell you, in childhood bereavement, what's isolating is you are acutely aware you are different at a
Yes.
time when you don't want to be different. And so I will say, like, around August, it was back to school shopping. I missed my mother in August just as much as I missed her anyways, all year long on a Tuesday. But I was acutely aware that she was missing out, that I would never have this, that my best friends have while they're back to school shopping with their mom in August. I didn't have someone to sit down and talk about the year ahead and, like who's going to be in my class and what teacher am I going to get. That's what my mother gave me in back to school shopping. So you start to lose experiences that your same age peers will have. That's one of the reasons it becomes so isolating. One of the first kids enrolled when we expanded to become more gender inclusive, which was always my narrative. My narrative was never, it's harder to be a mom to be a girl whose mom died than it was to be someone who lost their father. It was never my narrative. It was never my narrative that my brother didn't need help and like boys should just pick themselves up by their bootstraps and move
Mm-hmm.
on. I simply didn't have the money. And so we
Right.
received a $1 million unanticipated gift from the most generous family here in Boston who said, I know you have a model that can scale, and I see you want to scale this for all genders and for all parent loss. So that's why we did what we did. We changed our name from Empower Her to Empower. We spent some time in like brand and logo, but mostly we were just doing what we all knew inherently we should be doing. So one of the very first mentor matches we made when we expanded was a non-binary youth in high school, so 17 years old, non-binary youth matched who had just lost their father to cancer was matched with a woman who had lost her father to cancer at about the same age in childhood. And it's the most incredible match. But that child made the decision about, that mentor match, about
Mm.
gender, because every family does. I'm trying to dispel all these myths like, I never said that every girl whose mom died loves hair and makeup and boys and clothes, but my Mother's Day retreat started to look like hair and makeup and boys and clothes. And I was like, oh, no, 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 that wasn't my intent either. I wasn't saying that, oh, the sad thing about, your mom dying is like, you'll never learn how to do your hair. It's like, I have a lot of friends whose moms never taught them how to do their hair or
Right.
don't care about doing their hair. So I wanted to be clear about grief. This was a non-binary youth who was grieving the extremely painful loss of their father. And my goal was to teach them loss is survivable. And I matched them with a woman whose father died of cancer when she was young. because my goal in mentorship is teach loss is survivable. My goal in mentorship is not, teach you how to grieve. You are not a grief expert. I say to all the mentors, you are not a social worker. You are just an adult who shows a young person that you care. And because you have lived experience, even though our experiences are so different, gay or straight or black or white, the experience of grief connects us. But still, my story is my own. Never let anyone tell your story. And just because I lost my mother to breast cancer when I was 9 years old, I don't have all the same stories as another woman who was 9 years old when her mom died of breast cancer either,
Right.
because their story is their story. And because of that, I keep going back to this quote. I love the compassion tent that says, in the compassion tent, there's enough room for all of us to, hold hands and look each other in the eye and say, I see you, I hear you. My grief is not more shiny or more important than yours. In the compassion tent, hard things are just hard.
Mm-hmm.
And we're all in this together. So for me, I knew, especially there were children who may be going through times in their life that were really stressful or painful, and they also were missing their parent, right? And so that experience of, let's say, coming out to your family, it would be terrific if you had a mentor who had both experiences, had experienced a loss of a parent and going through a difficult period of adolescence or early adulthood, that you could relate. But again, my goal in mentorship was so maniacally focused on, it's the loss of a parent that we're trying to build community and to make sure you seen and heard, because you are missing that additional layer of support that a lot of your peers have. A cushy landing, as Claire Bidwell Smith said it, put it so well. When she was in college and having lost her mother and father, she looked around at her peers in college and thought, you all have a cushy landing. And that's what a lot of us missed. The job didn't work out, just go move home. The boyfriend didn't work out, you break up, go move home.
Call your mom.
And call your mom, call your dad. Yeah. And we just didn't have that. And so that was my goal in mentorship, was I wanted to reduce the isolation you felt in that, and from your peers. They have that extra layer of support that you are missing. It's the fact of your life.
It's not about the hobbies. It's not about the dresses. It's not about the sushi class. It's about the presence. It's about the shared experience. And I see you. I have lived an iteration of what you have lived. And I just love that your mission and your work is only getting bigger. Cara, thank you so much for coming on Grief Grower today. I'm so excited to share your story and the work of Empower. And I'm just so grateful to have had you here. This was really beautiful.
Thank you, Shelby. You're doing incredible work.
So that's all for this episode of Grief Grower. Thank you so much for joining me and Cara today. If you're looking for grief support beyond the show, you can find free workshops, blog articles, and my What's Your Grief Support Style quiz at shelbyforsythia.com/links. If this podcast felt validating, comforting, or helpful in any other way to you, please subscribe and leave a review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. And be sure to share this show with a friend, because you never know what someone you love is going through. A huge, huge thank you to the Grief Growers community for supporting the show and this work by becoming students inside my program, Life After Loss Academy. Inside Life After Loss Academy, you'll get access to my 5-step grief method, a course with a library of short, helpful videos you can watch on demand, plus weekly live coaching with me and your fellow grief growers, where you can bring your questions, struggles, milestone dates, and more. It is less than $35 a month to join, and you can cancel your membership at any time. Grief Grower is hosted by yours truly, Shelby Forsythia, and the theme music is by our own Addie Goldstein. Until next time, I see you. I am so proud of you and the work that you're doing in the world. And I love you. Because even through grief, we are growing.